On the eve of a dawn in 1999, a man was found collapsed inside his own car. Almost no valuable clues were left at the scene. The police conducted a massive investigation, but were unable to identify the perpetrator. For a time, the case was even considered a perfectly planned crime. As time passed, it gradually became an unsolved mystery. However, 20 years later, a mysterious call from abroad brought the case back into the spotlight. Would it change the outcome of this story? The story takes place on Jeju Island, South Korea's largest island and a popular tourist destination. The northern city of Jeju is the economic and transportation hub of the island, with Jeju International Airport located here. It is often the first stop for visitors arriving on the island. For a long time, Jeju has been known for its three highs and three lows. The three highs refer to the frequent winds, abundant rocks, and large number of women reflecting the island's climate and the culture of the sea women. The three lows mean there are no gates, no thieves and no beggars, indicating a society where lost items are not stolen, and people live in simplicity. However, this peaceful atmosphere was once overshadowed. Following these traces, he eventually came across a car. Inside the car, there was a man with his head resting on the steering wheel, seemingly asleep. Mr. Yang felt something was wrong, so he called out to the man, but there was no response. He tapped the man on the shoulder and immediately sensed that something serious had happened, so he called the police. The police arrived at the scene quickly to investigate. They found numerous traces both on the street and inside the car. The man was sitting in the driver's seat, still holding the car keys in his right hand. It seemed that he had been attacked outside the car and tried to hide inside and drive away, but due to his severe injuries, he was unable to succeed. The forensic examination revealed that the man had suffered a fatal blow, causing him to lose too much blood and die within no more than 24 hours. There were multiple defensive wounds on his body, suggesting that the weapon used was some kind of sharp object. According to the investigation, the man was the well-known local lawyer Lee Seong-ryong, who was 44 years old at the time. The car belonged to him and was not damaged. The belongings worth 300,000 Korean. His friend said they had a pleasant conversation and didn't drink much. It wasn't until 3 a.m. that Lee Seong-ryong left, appearing conscious and able to walk normally. After leaving, he called the waitress at a coffee shop in Yeongdong 3 times, stating that he was on his way there. The last call was recorded at 3:11 a.m. 4 minutes later. The waitress left a message saying she had gone home and was no longer at the coffee shop. But Lee Seong-ryong did not receive it. Based on this, the police estimated that the incident occurred between 3:10 a.m. and 6:48 a.m. on the 5th of November. His car was about 300 meters away from the crime scene, and it would have taken less than 3 minutes to walk there. It is very likely that the perpetrator had been lurking there, or following Lee Seong-ryong closely in order to act quickly. At that time, monitoring systems had not yet become widespread in South Korea. The police interviewed the residents in the vicinity. During the time of the incident, the street lights had been turned off, leaving outsiders. They appeared to be a happy and warm family, and there seemed to be no conflicts between the couple. However, what caught the police attention was that Lee Cheng-grong's wife was a doctor who had a thorough understanding of the human body, and the tool used by the perpetrator was very similar to surgical instruments. In the early hours before the incident, Lee Cheng-grong had contacted a female waitress at a cafe. Some speculated that his wife might have killed him out of anger at his alleged misconduct. The investigation revealed that Lee Cheng-grong was generally an upright person, with no rumors about him. He often went to that cafe to read books, which is why he contacted the waitress to reserve a table. There was no other private relationship between them, and a large number of books were found in his car, further confirming his habits. Based on past experience, insurance money or property disputes could also be motives for spouses to commit crimes. The police then conducted a thorough investigation into the wife's financial situation, but found nothing unusual. As a doctor, her income was already quite high, so there was no need for her to take such extreme measures. When questioned by the police, the wife cooperated fully and provided credible alibis, which meant he had many enemies. Friends of Lee Cheng-rong said that he had stopped taking on new cases before the incident and seemed to be preparing to close his law firm and move away with his family. It was unclear whether he had offended someone. In his early years as a prosecutor, he was known for his ruthlessness and had led operations against violent organizations in Jeju, sending several key members to prison. Therefore, the police began investigating the local gangsters. During the questioning process, gang members provided each other with alibis, and without substantial evidence, the investigation made little progress. Next, the police reviewed all the case files that Lee Cheng-rong had handled over the past decade and compiled a list of more than 50 people. They focused on those who had recently been released from prison or had threatened to retaliate against the lawyer, but although these individuals had motives, they all had alibis and lacked the means to commit the crime. Among the many cases, one particular one attracted the police's attention. 1 year before the incident, Jeju Special Self-Governing Province was about to undergo a change in governor. The governor was the highest administrative official in the region. At that time, many people, including not long after the incident occurred, the police offered a reward of 5 million Korean won to solicit information publicly, which was a considerable amount at that time. In 1999, the minimum hourly wage in South Korea was 1.525 Korean won, so 5 million Korean won was equivalent to the income of some people working continuously for 1.5 years. Unfortunately, despite this, they never received any clues that could advance the investigation. Gradually, the case investigation reached deadlock. Some people even considered it a perfect crime, arguing that without reports from relevant individuals or the criminal turning himself in, solving the case would be extremely difficult. As a result, the case remained unsolved. On the 4th of November 2014, 15 years had passed since the incident. According to South Korean law, the statute of limitations for this case had expired. This meant that even if the suspect were caught, the police would no longer be able to file charges. It was very unlikely that the case could be convicted and closed legally, and it might be permanently shelved. In 2019, 20 years after the incident, something unexpected happened. A man living abroad contacted South Korean Kim, then approached a close friend within the gang, nicknamed Seagull, who was the same age as him and always consulted with him on matters. After learning the details, Seagull pointed out that Lee Seong-ryong had a special status and that any mistakes would surely lead to an investigation. He also mentioned that Lee Seong-ryong was quite skilled in martial arts. Seagull volunteered to take on the risk and carry out the task himself. He followed Lee Seong-ryong every day, observing his routine and movements, waiting for the right moment to act. On the day of the incident, at 5 a.m., Kim suddenly received a call from Seagull. Seagull sounded panicked and said something like, "This is bad." Kim guessed that Lee Seong-ryong might have been injured. Half an hour later, the two met at the agreed-upon location, and Kim realized that the situation was much more serious than he had imagined. Seagull's clothes were badly damaged and covered in signs of a fight trembling. Seagull described what had happened. Lee Seong-ryong had just left a bar and was about to drive to a cafe when Seagull approached him from behind. When Lee Seshi also mentioned that as he aged, his health began to decline, and he wanted to apologize to Lee Seong-ryong's family before passing away, which would help clear his wife's name completely. Regarding the tool used by Seagull, Kim described it as a fruit knife that had been specially modified and looked somewhat like a surgical instrument. He even drew a sketch on paper which closely matched the police's previous theories. The media team brought in an expert in mechanical engineering and replicated the tool, according to Kim's description. Tests confirmed that it was capable of causing wounds similar to those suffered by Lee Seong-ryong, making Kim's account even more credible. However, there are several unusual aspects to Kim's testimony. First, he provided very detailed descriptions of how Seagull carried out the attack, even specifying the arrangement of items inside Lee Seong-ryong's car at the time of the incident, but became vague when it came to what he had done himself. Second, experts pointed out that Lee Seong-ryong's wounds were so deep that they were unlikely to have been caused by intense resistance or accidental mistakes. It seemed more likely that the killer had no intention of leaving any room for error from the beginning. The media team tried to contact, however. Haigi did not mention the Lee Cheng-grong case in his will. Friends around him all said that the reason for his death was financial difficulties caused by failed investments, and he had shown extreme sadness on several occasions due to this. It is also worth mentioning that 1 year before the incident, Haigao was wanted nationwide for robbing 60 million Korean won. At the time of Lee Cheng-grong's case, he was a key target of the police. Just for his friend, he risked being arrested or receiving more severe punishment, and committed another crime against the odds, which seems somewhat unreasonable. Since both key figures have passed away, it is difficult to verify which parts of Kim's statement are true and which are false. Some suspect that Kim himself may have been involved in the crime. Lee Cheng-grong was 175 centimeters tall, and based on the analysis of the wound marks, experts believe that the perpetrator was likely someone taller and stronger. Kim is 180 centimeters tall and had the physical conditions to commit the crime, while Haig, who was about 170 centimeters tall, would have found it more difficult to do so. Kim's neighbor said that they had seen him carry a very special. The first thing that came to the production team's mind was the infamous governor bribery case. Through interviews with various parties, they confirmed that the camp that won the election back then was indeed closely connected to the gang Kim belonged to. They then found the man who had initially reported the illegal ticket buying, who explained that he had intended to expose the truth completely, but due to the pleas of his family, especially his grandmother, he chose to go into hiding for the safety of his family. However, before disappearing, he had indeed handed over all the evidence related to the bribery case to Lee Chang-rong. Strangely enough, no relevant documents were found among Lee Chang-rong's belongings, and his work computer was well preserved, but the data on it was severely damaged and mostly irrecoverable, making it impossible to extract any crucial evidence. In response to interviews, the former governor even admitted that he was too busy with work at the time and had no memory of the Lee Chang-rong case. Thus, this line of investigation was once again interrupted. The production team then reviewed the cases that Lee Chang-rong had been handling before his death. A dispute over the management rights of a hotel came to their attention. This hotel was a large-scale establishment that then forcibly closed the illegal entertainment venues that Han Jiyoung-kun had set up in the hotel, almost cutting off the latter's sources of profit. The investigation revealed that Han Jiyoung-kun had always resorted to violence and money to solve problems while managing the hotel, and had close ties with the local gang. Kim and Haegu were core members of this organization. After the hotel began to face problems, Han Jiyoung-kun initially tried to avoid further involvement, attempting to bribe or threaten with gang power, but Lee Cheng-grong was firm and refused to compromise, planning to hand over the newly collected evidence to the prosecution. In fact, Han Jiyoung-kun's ultimate goal was not the hotel itself but a casino. He planned to use the hotel as collateral for a loan. A former hotel employee said that Han Jiyoung-kun had publicly threatened to remove Lee Cheng-grong as an obstacle, indicating that he had a strong motive to commit the crime. Records show that before and after the incident, Kim frequently entered and left the hotel, even staying in the presidential suite, and his daily expenses were astonishingly high. However, all these bills were waived by the hotel. Not long after the incident, Han Chong-kun did not proceed with He insisted that the case had nothing to do with him, due to the lack of concrete evidence. This lead came to an end again. After the program was broadcast, it caused a great deal of attention, and the police resumed their investigation. As the investigation progressed, a chilling detail came to light. Kim's brother had a friend who was a police officer, and it was said that this person had repeatedly passed on internal information to Kim. Even more absurdly, this friend was assigned to the investigation team dealing with Lee Chang-rong's case. At the same time, Kim's attitude as a whistleblower suddenly changed completely. He contacted the program team to express his strong dissatisfaction, blaming them for making the situation worse and causing him to attract the attention of the police, and even threatening them on the phone. Kim changed his previous statements, claiming that he did not know the mastermind behind the plot, that Hyo directly communicated with the person in charge, and that the 30 million Korean won reward was also given directly to Hyo. By this point, no matter how much he changed his story, it was too late. The police confirmed that whether the case was about fraud or a hotel dispute, Lee Chang-rong's death might be related. However, what Kim never expected was that fate had already written a script for him in secret. Two coincidences that occurred many years after the incident intertwined to create an inescapable web for him. The police could still prosecute him. It turned out that, according to the law, the statute of limitations for the case had indeed expired in November 2014. But after Kim reported the case voluntarily, the police found during their investigation that 8 months before the expiration of the statute of limitations, in March 2014, he had been wanted nationwide for fraud and had fled overseas, where he stayed for some time. According to the law, if a suspect flees abroad to avoid criminal punishment, the statute of limitations is suspended, so the statute of limitations for this case was extended until December 2015. Then another incident completely changed the course of events. Half a year before the Lee Chang-rong case, the well-known Taein incident occurred in South Korea. In that case, a 6-year-old child was attacked by an unidentified man with chemical substances on his way to school, resulting in the loss of his vision and damage to over 40% of his body. He was clinically diagnosed with severe. The Tien law officially took effect on the 31st of July. At that time, the statute of limitations for the Lee Chang-rong case had not yet expired, so this law applied, allowing for indefinite prosecution. In fact, Kim had previously researched the legal aspects related to the statute of limitations. After the Tien law was enacted, the media reported uniformly that homicide cases that occurred after the 1st of August 2000 could be prosecuted indefinitely. This led Kim to believe that he could escape legal consequences, so he boldly approached the media to reveal the information. Although the police could still prosecute him, the lack of physical evidence made the trial process very complicated. In the 20th of February 22 years after the incident occurred, the case was brought to trial at the Jeju District Court. The police believed that Kim had received 30 million Korean won from unidentified individuals, which provided a motive for the crime. They presented interview videos of Kim as important evidence, pointing out that his descriptions of the events were detailed in a way that would be impossible for someone who was not present at the time to know. For example, Kim mentioned that the wipers of Lee Seong-ryong's car in court. Kim claimed to suffer from Rapsi syndrome, a personality disorder characterized by the repeated fabrication of lies in order to gain a higher social status, ultimately leading to a confusion of one's own identity. He stated that he had lied in the program in order to save face and attract attention, and that he had invented various details about the crime in an attempt to prove that his previous statements were unreliable and thus legally invalid. The defense argued that the location where the crime occurred was under the control of another gang at that time, and there had been intense conflicts between that gang and Kim's own faction. If Kim had committed the crime there, the risk of retaliation from the other gang would have been extremely high. After a period of trial, the court ultimately ruled that Kim was not guilty of murder, but was found guilty of intimidation and was sentenced to 1 year and 6 months in prison. Both the prosecution and the defense appealed against the verdict. Half a year later, the Gwangju High Court held that the indirect evidence provided by the prosecution was sufficient to form a complete chain of evidence, and ruled that Kim was guilty of murder, sentencing him to 12 years in prison. Kim appealed again against this decision. Subsequently, in the process of revisiting this old case, they have also learned many positive things about their father. He once cried in court for a woman who had gone astray because of her child illness, and he also paid out of his own pockets to buy train tickets for those who were financially struggling. These stories have left a lasting impression on the island of Jeju. However, who exactly was the perpetrator? Perhaps only he himself knows the answer to that question.